And here we are, another hour of live streaming at Markna 2023. I am Mark Levinson, and it almost seems like Marco Rocks came up with the idea of Markna because of the Mark part. Marco Rocks did become a sponsor of Markna and was very excited to support it. Sent some rock in advance for us to look at, overnighted it quickly, which is kind of crazy, and sent us some drinking glasses, which was kind of fun, and sent us a video that we could share. And I believe we've shared that. If we have, we'll share that also here shortly. Trying to remember if that ever got done. I have to ask Ian in a little bit if I can get him back up off the carpet. But we are coming up. This is speaker number, I think it's 22, right? Yes, Morgan is 22. Here I am. We are trying to share the screen of her presentation on my side. So this is getting a little bit complicated, but I think we can make this work. And
I believe.
Here is Morgan, a.k.a. Reef Goddess from Instagram, a.k.a. Reef Gardener in real life, and runs a coral business. And I wanted to talk with her about what it's like running this business. And actually, the more we talked about it behind the scenes, the more interesting it got, because she's not even doing the gardening locally. She has to go to basically a co-op to do her, I would say, as a co-op. I don't know if you've thought of it that way or if you said that and I just didn't pay attention.
Sort of. I mean, there's just not that many people in the co-op, but definitely.
But it seems like you have a co-op. So yeah, I'd love for you to kind of tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll get into your slides here next if you want to do that.
Sure. Sounds good to me. I actually do have two 80-gallon deep blue tanks in my apartment, so I do a little bit of farming here too. So.
Okay, so you've got a tank, right? And
I have two. Two 80-gallon deep blue tanks in my apartment,
right?
And they're jam-packed with corals. And then later on in the presentation, I'll start talking about the Solana farm. So.
Okay. Bring your microphone a little closer to the front of you.
No problem.
That'd be better. See, oh, look at that. Suddenly it sounds like you're next to me again. You're not down the hallway.
See, I knew you wanted to get close.
I am one of those guys that just like get on that microphone. All right, so here are your slides. You're just going to tell me next, and
Indeed,
I will just do these as you say.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and thank you so much for Mark for going through all the trials and tribulations that you guys have been through to pull this off. I'm extremely impressed and very honored that I get to be in the morning slot today. My name is Morgan Moore. I run reefgardener.com/reefgardener.net. And you may have seen me on Instagram with reef_goddess. I have been doing this for 20 plus years. I've had the business for 18. I guess you could call me a lifer. I still absolutely love the hobby as much as if it was my first day in. And I started it was my ex-husband's hobby, and he was extremely knowledgeable, and he started me off on a 10-gallon aquarium, and eventually I took over his 58, and we had a 75, and that turned into a 58, 75, and 125, and eventually we got a 180. So I did not go to school for marine biology. I went to school for international relations and Asian studies, and then I couldn't find a job in it to save my life, so I was doing odds and ends, and we became good at coral farming, and I started selling frags to local friends, and one day I was just hunting around on eBay for random stuff that I didn't need and typed in coral and found out that there were a handful of people doing it, and I got into it. I said, well, hell, I want to learn how to do this, and I did, and I incorporated in 2005, and it's been a journey, lots of ups and downs and ins and outs, but I'm still here at it, and I have the most wonderful customers a person could ask for. My new customers are amazing. My customers have been with me for 15 years. They've been so supportive through my journey, and it's just been really awesome time overall. There are things like anybody that I'm not in love with, like packing and shipping corals, but growing corals.
Yeah, you have to tell that whole story. I mean, this is the perfect time for filler. So tell us about what happened this week, because it was funny. She was like, you wouldn't believe the day I had. And I'm just like, I lost power for 23 hours. How was your day?
Well, I wasn't gonna, after you lost power, I wasn't gonna try to compare to your day. I was like, okay, you win this one.
Yeah,
I shipped out 7 boxes on Tuesday after the holiday,
right.
and I'm actually luckily, which is generally very good for my business. I'm pretty close to the UPS Miami hub, which
Uh-huh.
is at the international airport. I dropped them off, and then that morning I got a message from a customer saying, "So, what's happening with the tracking?" I said, "Oh, I never like to get those messages."
Right. I'm like, what do you
And
mean?
so I checked the tracking. Every single order is still in Miami. I went to the UPS and at first the office manager was like, "Well, you'll just have to file a claim. We don't know where they are." I'm like, "You don't understand. This is a lot of money in corals. If we
Yeah.
don't pick them up, they'll die." So thankfully, one of the guys took pity on me and called another guy, and they had put them. The conveyor belt at the UPS hub had broken that
Right. So
evening.
no boxes are moving because the
No
conveyors are
box.
everything. Yeah.
Exactly. So I guess, it's like a huge factory. If the conveyor belt breaks, the factory pretty much stops.
Yeah.
So so I picked them up. I was able to get them, took them home, rewatered
You
the orders,
unbagged them.
unbagged, rewatered the orders that wanted to still go out. Then I had to ship an additional 6 boxes that were supposed to go that day.
Right.
Shipped them all out, and yeah, it's been a journey because
Yeah, but then you went back to ship them, and then there was still some conveyor thing because the next
I
day you had to get all of them again.
no, no, it wasn't that bad.
Oh,
I shipped 12 that day,
okay.
and 6 made it out. 5 did not. 5 I guess their conveyor belt was not fully fixed, so it did
Right?
sort of break late at night. So
Yeah.
there were 6 that made it out, but they made it out late. So
Uh-huh.
that means they were delayed a day. And
Right.
normally, if we hadn't been having such hot weather,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of the up north states, in Connecticut and New York, they were in the 90s just a
Uh-huh.
couple days. Crazy. Um, so normally there would have been a chance that those delayed orders would make it,
Right.
but yeah. So thankfully, like I tell my customers, I have a lot of coral
Right.
and I can replace things. So I always stand by my customers, even if it costs me a bit. I always help them replace stuff
Yeah.
because
You said
you.
something about the shipping labels wouldn't get reimbursed or something. So, like, when you went to rescue that stuff, you still had to pay for the quote unquote shipping, even though it didn't actually ship anywhere and you rescued them back.
Yeah, and I'm going to give a little plug here because they have been wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
If you are an aquarist or a coral farmer looking for a great third-party shipping company,
Mm-hmm.
go.finishship.com has been really fantastic with me. They helped refund me for labels that UPS was not going to honor. So
Oh,
they,
Finiship. I use Finiship.
yeah. They said,
Nice.
yeah,
Awesome. That's great. I didn't know you were doing that. That's fantastic. But
yeah,
yeah, it's crazy. You have to go rescue your stuff. I ship my stuff ground because it's dry goods. And
right,
so it's
right.
just a matter of when it shows up, but nothing's going to die in my boxes, which is nice.
Yeah, the element of stress definitely goes up a little bit when things
Yeah.
are going.
I have
So.
toyed with the thought of selling corals because everyone that sells corals seems to have more money than I do.
Hmm.
And they seem to make more money than I do. But I've had close friends say, whatever you do, do not sell corals. Don't do it. Don't do it. I'm like, okay, fine, forget it. Because they said, you're going to hate it. The customers are going to say it didn't get here. They're going to say it's already dead. They're not going to prove that
Uh,
they're dead. And they're going to reverse charges on credit cards. And he's made it sound like, no, I should never do this.
I mean, I can't speak for other sellers. I think I have been blessed to attract really great sellers, or
Buyers. Yeah,
really great buyers.
that's
In
good.
my entire history of my website, I've
Hmm.
had maybe 3 or 4 chargebacks. So
Hmm.
I really have had excellent customers. And every once in a while, when there is someone disgruntled, I just get them on the phone and try to talk with them and be like, listen, how can I make this right? That
Yeah.
customers, if you're good at customer service, you'll be fine. There's a lot of
Okay.
people that aren't good at customer service, and that's where I think where their downfall comes.
Yeah,
So,
that's the trick. All right,
and I
so
mean, yeah. So I eventually I have started the business. became really good at growing corals.
Hmm.
And so you can go to the next slide, I
The
believe.
next one is about your home aquarium
Yeah, these
parameters.
are my home aquarium parameters.
Hmm.
So um, I learned the Berlin method from my ex. He really swore by that, and it's helped me for, gosh, I have had bare bottom tanks probably for 15 years now,
Wow.
more. Yeah, I don't miss it. I used to, when I first got into the business a few years, probably about 5 years, we also did maintenance for other people.
Hmm.
And it was just such a hassle, vacuuming red slime or detritus off your sand bed and eventually watching your sand bed get thinner and thinner and thinner.
Yes.
And yeah, so, and I used to grow a lot of hard corals.
Hmm.
So having, if you're growing a lot of acropora, as long as you have great skimmers. I usually keep a couple chunky pieces of live rock in my sump,
Uh-huh.
and then I have quite a bit of live rock in the tank, and nothing ever seems to mind it. I always tell people that it's really good to put some live rock in your sump. Say if you have a frag tank with just frag racks and nothing else, because then you can really open yourself up for issues if you have a pH swing or an alk swing or something like that, and you don't have that buffer to kind of stabilize things.
Right.
So, yeah. So for me, I always tell my customers, because I have customers that oh, I just have a 60, or I just have this, and if they're not testing their water chemistry regularly, I test. I'm really old school. I manually test my alkalinity 2 or 3
Good.
times a week. So
Nice.
I've had issues in the past where a kalkwasser stir overdosed
Uh-huh.
like 30 gallons. So,
Ooh.
I'm very like, that's a long time ago, but still, when that happens, it kind of burns you, and then you just get used to doing things manually. Um, and
Yep.
I do my overall water chemistry tests a couple times a month for everything,
Oops.
but I think it's really important, especially I think when I was growing SPS 10 years ago, people were always really chasing that 0, 0, which I think people have learned now isn't, zero nitrates, zero phosphates isn't the healthiest thing for a reef. Now in my left side tank, which is very softy dominated, that's where all my leather corals and my zoanthids and anemones and stuff.
Hmm.
My nitrates in there are at least 40 to 50 ppm, but nothing
Right.
cares.
Yeah.
Everything loves it. They really like it. I don't like the hair algae that grows, but all the corals, I mean, the leathers just suck it up. And I never have phosphates. They just consume whatever there is so quickly that there's no phosphates in either reef.
That's great.
Uh, yeah, and I counsel people, be conscientious. This is a ecosystem that you're creating. This is your miniature planet. Don't go putting a nasotang in a 60-gallon aquarium.
Hmm.
I try as much as possible when I buy fish to get fish that are very small, so that way they can grow into a tank. So right now in my right side tank, I have a blue hippo tang and a powder brown that I inherited from a tank I bought out
Hmm.
last year, and they're, the powder brown is actually being aggressive towards the hippo, and I'm like, I'm gonna have to break down the tank at some point soon and
Yeah.
either home them or get a 6 foot tank, because it's just not big enough for what they need. So,
Yeah.
but
Or put a divider partition there so they each have a half a tank.
I mean, it's only an 80-gallon tank. It would
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
awful. Give
Yeah.
them less swimming space. So
Right.
yeah. So I've been doing the coral farming here at this current place for about, I guess, 5 years in my current apartment. I did have a bad warehouse fire in 2017, so I took
Mm.
a break from the hobby for about a year and a half. And I had so many customers that just waited on me, and I said, "Well, I'm not up yet," and they'd be like, "It's okay, we'll wait." And they were fantastic, so
That's awesome.
supportive. Um, but one of the suppliers that I get my Caribbean corals from,
Hmm.
he kept telling me that he had a friend down in Marathon, down in the
Hmm.
Florida. And he said, "Oh, he's got a coral farm." He showed me a couple pictures, but they were bad pictures, so it didn't look like it was much. So I was like, yeah. So then finally, he kept bugging me. I said, all right, I'll go down. And
Hmm.
so pictures of when I first went down to the Keys.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, this is the coral farm that Eric had. I think Eric set up this current coral farm about 4 or 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's, it's a real old school setup. It's the all of the these are about 8x3 fiberglass tanks,
Mm-hmm.
and the plumbing must have been a mission because for biosecurity purposes, he every single tank is a closed loop, and none of the water gets held in the systems, so it all flushes out every day. It's on a 30-foot saltwater well, and the rest is driven by sunlight. So it's
Can you believe that there's a well that gives you salt water? That, I mean, I understand Marathon. I know where that is because I've been there once on my way to the very end of the Keys, so I could
right.
stand by the thing that says I'm this close to Cuba. You know what I'm talking about?
Sure, sure, sure.
That marker.
Hmm.
But I still always think when you drill down, you get fresh water. But they drill down and they get salt water because of
Yeah,
their
because you're that close to
location.
the ocean. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, the tanks don't look like much, but then when you look inside the tanks, these are
Mm-hmm.
some of the corals that Eric is growing. And he's not a hobbyist, like,
Mm-hmm.
he's not an addicted hobbyist like we are. He's been a marine life collector all of his life. And he just kind of fell into it because wholesalers and different people who he dealt with would give him little bits of coral and be like, hey, you want to grow this for me for a while? So he did, and he's quite good at it. Um, and being under the natural sunlight, stuff really does pretty well. It's a mixed bag because some things do great and other things don't do well. But overall, I think most of us who have grown hard corals in our reef tanks with a lot of flow, that's what we're used to. We're like, oh, you can only grow hard corals if you had to have nice current and such and such. But the flow in these tanks is like a tidal pool. It's very low, and still the coral is just, you'll start with a inch and a half frag, and within 5 months you'll have a solid mini colony. So it's
Mm-hmm.
really fantastic. So I decided to these are a couple photos of the coral under the sunlight and the coral
Yeah,
under the
under
blue
the fake
LED
light.
lights. Exactly. You can go to the next slide.
Okay.
And that's I was just speaking with Rudy Batara recently, and he
Yeah.
said that one is the Acropora caroliniana, and I call it Solana jaw dropper
Mm-hmm.
because the farm owners they bought it about a year and a half ago,
Mm-hmm.
and unfortunately they forgot who they got it from. So
Mm-hmm.
they said it was a jaw dropper, but they don't have lineage, which makes it a little bit challenging. And the TGC red Cadillac just grows like bonkers down there too. But because, and you'll see a little further in, there's a shade cloth they keep over the greenhouse year round.
Mm-hmm.
Eric says that the algae will grow like nuts if they don't keep the shade cloth over.
Mm-hmm.
So that creates a limiting factor in that the par is not as strong as if it was full sun.
Yeah.
Uh, and so a lot of your rainbow acropora tenuises and your high end SPS, they don't really like it down there, or they'll grow, but they'll just be brown.
Yeah.
So you really have to have a finishing tank for this farm in order for a lot of the SPS to look their best. Now, primary color SPS like Oregon torts and blues and reds, and now Monteporas will generally have fantastic color shades. It's been interesting. So I chatted with the owner, and we decided that it was a good fit.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been down there. I started in. You can go to the next slide.
Oh, it's a
Oh,
video.
that's the video. Let's see if the video plays.
See
So
if it works. Is the audio something I have to mute? Is
I
that you
don't
cussing it
know.
out?
No, no, no. It's just watery sounding audio. So this is, I guess this would be the Tyree stunner. This isn't the Hollywood stunner.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of an example of what will happen if corals don't sell
Yeah.
and they're left to their own devices. These were a bunch of frags that turned into like one massive colony. I mean, have to remember these are 8x3 aquariums, so this thing was just huge.
Yeah. Wow. Just goes for
And
miles.
Yeah, and it sort of gives you an idea of, as a coral farmer, we have to be a little brutal, if something isn't selling and it's growing massive. And oh, and he has some diadema
Hmm.
urchins in there as well. Um, then we have to cull it and kind of toss it out, unfortunately, because these are all non-native species. We can't put them in the coral reefs down there. So, wait,
Right.
there've been lots of times we're like, can't we just put this over there, in the water over there? But no, you
Just
can't
throw
do
it in the well.
that.
It's a
Exactly.
saltwater well. That'll be fine.
So this is where I started. I
Hmm.
buried, and I said, let me go down there. I mean, this is the most space I had had in a long time. I mean, I'm used to farming in tanks that are much smaller. So to be
Right.
able to have this opportunity to experiment down under the sunlight and see how things go. So I just took a whole bunch of different things from
Hmm.
my own and put them down there. One of the things that I do, and I always encourage other people to do, is like when I'm growing zoanthids or other encrusting corals, put them on a big tile.
Hmm.
Put them on a tile where they can grow out, and then when they've grown out, all you have to do is slide a razor under the mat and cut.
Hmm.
A lot of people still let their zoanthids and other things grow out on the egg crate, but when you do that, then you have to cut all your egg crate up, which
Yeah.
egg crate isn't as cheap as it used to be nowadays. And you can go to the next slide. And those are some, little frags, bird's nest, stylophora, different montiporas that I started out when I first went down there. And keep going. And so that this is kind of when you're going into this sort of thing, it's very different farming under the sunlight compared to farming in a controlled tank. I
Hmm.
go down pretty religiously twice a month as long as I can have the time to do so.
Hmm.
uh, because I noticed that other people who were farming down there that maybe they were only going once every couple of months, stuff just you just can't keep a good control on it. It's like
Right.
growing an actual garden. Things will grow over each other.
Yeah.
Weeds and different things have a way of creeping in, and because you are on that full lunar solar cycle, oh man, the things you want to grow well, but the things you don't want to grow well, like aptasia and bubble
Hmm.
algae and stuff, they'll grow really well too.
Yeah.
so so and for me, I noticed in Eric's tanks, he has kind of more of a monoculture of a lot of, he has a few different corals, whereas I decided I wanted to really maximize that tank. I mean, that's always the way I have been as far as coral farming. How many corals can I fit in this tank?
Yeah.
With safely without them hurting each other. How many different things can I grow? And I feel like that's one of the things that keeps my business viable is I'm always looking for new things or looking for new old things. There's a lot of corals in the hobby that were very popular 10, 15 years ago that became too prevalent. Red planet, pink bird's nest, purple digitata, red digitata, that have become very hard to find
Hmm.
nowadays. So I do a lot of hunting on Facebook groups and going to different frag swaps and picking stuff up from other hobbyist farmers. Supporting other hobbyist farmers is really, really an important part of my business. And one of the things I was lucky to do is one of the tanks that I bought out had a Scopus tank in it. So I didn't have any space for it up here. So I took it down to the farm. It's in heaven. I have zero algae whatsoever. I
Right.
mean, that tank is spotless.
There's your
So
cleanup crew.
exactly, yeah. And when I went to when I was snorkeling one day, I was able to pick up. I know an area where there are some large cirrus snails. They're like the extra large type that
Yeah.
grow to about 2 to 2.5 inches. And everybody likes astrea snails because they're cheap, but astraeas, when they turn over, they can't turn themselves back over, so they
Right.
die really easily. I've had the same three cirrus snails in that tank for over a year now, so
Yeah.
that really, yeah. So you can move on. And these are just some pictures of what a paradise it is. Once you get past Tavernier, the ocean views just open up, and it is just gorgeous down
You
there.
say paradise, but number one, it's black and white. Number two, it's a hurricane.
That's not a hurricane. That's
It's
just a
coming
regular.
for you, and it's coming for your corals. That's
That's
pretty.
just a regular thunderstorm. So yeah,
Oh, that looks nice.
yeah.
So listen, you're, I guess, Miami basically, and then you
Yes,
drive
25
to,
years. So yeah,
but you drive to your farm that's 2 hours away.
I do. Yes.
And like I said, I really do think it's a co-op. Like there are
Yeah.
places where people live in the city and they drive out to the country to have their patch
Yeah.
of earth and they grow some carrots and some lettuce and some
hmm
spinach,
hmm
and you are basically doing this with a 2 hour each way drive. And
Yeah.
I know those lanes. It's not like this high speed highway. It's like two lanes
No,
and if
it
something's
is.
coming up, you all slow down or whatever.
It's a great drive to have a Toyota Prius because I get about 62 miles per gallon down in
All
the
right.
footage.
And I guess a lot of audiobooks or something to survive. Or do you listen to the Mila's
Yes,
Reef
I
podcast? What are
talk
you
with my
doing for all that
partner.
time?
A lot of podcasts.
Yeah, that's what I
Podcasts.
figured.
I talk with
Yeah,
my partner too. So,
right.
so this is October 2022. So if you'll notice, I started in May 2022. So this
Hmm.
shows you how quick stuff goes.
Yeah.
Um, and one of the corals that really did very well for about the first 8 months or so was the firework close, which you see here.
Hmm.
They gangbusters down there. They absolutely loved it. Um, the interesting thing about down here is that some of the challenges, which I'll talk about further in, is that the water is fairly low nutrient. We're
Hmm.
talking when I test for nitrates, they're trace. When I test phosphates, it's zero. Calcium, thankfully, it remains about 420.
Oh.
Salinity varies. Most of the time, it's 1.024. Like I was telling Mark the other day, after the hurricane had kind of passed by,
Hmm.
I guess they had had a lot of rain, so it went down to 1.021. So
Hmm.
there are definitely things that it is like having a garden outside. I mean, there are things that affect your stuff, and
Yeah.
there are corals. I've tried utter chaos multiple times. I've tried rostas, there sunny D's, certain zoanthids. I think there's just not enough active nutrients in the water, so
Right.
they'll do great for 3 or 4 months, and then you'll go down and oh, oh, well, I guess my colony's gone.
Yeah, that's not
Damn it.
good.
And I think what's funny about it is because they'll do really well for 3 or 4 months, you're like, oh yeah, oh no, okay, damn,
Yeah.
get
Should
your
have
hopes up.
should have sold them sooner. Right.
But then the stuff that acclimates down there,
Hmm.
and really the 3 to 4 month mark is kind of the trial period.
Hmm.
And I know Eric because he's been farming down there obviously for a lot longer, and
Right.
he's like, yeah, I don't really frag anything or pay attention to it until it's been here for 4 or 5 months because it's
Hmm.
not worth the point because he's lost a lot of stuff that he's tried.
Right.
Um, but you can see in the center there, those blue acropora, those are the Oregon torts, and man, they great down there. One of the things I do is in order to keep a really high amount of biodiversity, because I have a lot of different types of corals down there, I keep everything at sort of bonsai colony size. So my
Yeah.
birds of paradise, they're all about that size
Hmm.
because if you let it get too big, you're not going to have space for other stuff.
Yeah.
So, and,
I
and
really do like the farming in the sunlight, screen or no screen. I mean, I understand why you do the screen,
right.
but I find it fascinating because you look at the corals a lot more closely, and not like these two. I mean, those two in the middle shot are pretty, but there are things that, like the earlier picture we had, that was kind of brown.
Right.
But as you're looking at it, you can totally tell how much potential it has when it gets out of the sunlight, and you can find those gems in a trough. And you can say,
Yeah.
this is going to look amazing in a reef tank. You just know. I mean, it's something
Yeah.
you learn through experience. You can't just pick up an acro and say, this is going to look amazing. But certain corals will totally look fantastic. And
Right.
and then, you give it to the person and they put it in their tank and like, how did you know? And you could just see it. It's like looking at the facets of a diamond. You can kind of tell this is going to, blow you away.
Yeah, and they do have a blue LED light it's not OSHA friendly. They put it on like a 100-foot extension cord, and you just carry it over your shoulder at night and
That's
look at
funny.
stuff. But it's interesting because I'm not exactly sure where it comes from. Maybe it's from the groundwater,
Uh-huh.
but the water at night has a faint green glow to it. And
Huh.
that's something that you would think would occur if the water was being held in the system. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's phytoplankton or something, but
Right.
the water's not being held in this system. It flushes out all the time. So I don't know. It's Tyler with Addictive Reef Keeping. He rents the better part of that farm and
Mm-hmm.
he has his Mad Lab over on the other side.
Uh-huh.
And so he always talks about the salt water down there being miracle water. So
Huh.
and for a lot of corals, I guess it is. So
Miracle Grow, maybe?
no, yeah.
It's kind of greenish.
It's Florida. Anything's possible.
Somebody might be growing some mangroves and it's getting into the well and coming back up, and
Very-
you're getting some Miracle Grow in your Miracle Water.
Who knows? So
I mean, even these things look like they had some Miracle Grow. Look at them. Lemon
yeah, they're
lime.
gorgeous. I love those lemon lime splatter hammers. Those I got from
Yeah, those are
Indonesia.
cool.
Yeah, yeah. And the Euphelia just do great down there. Torches, as usual, when you get them in from the wild, they're a little more tricky. But
Hmm.
this is an example. So that bottom on that left side photo, that
Hmm.
bottom half quadrant is all the same colony of Indonesian frog spawn. And I found that from a good friend of mine now in Miami Beach. He had been growing this bicolor Indo frog spawn for 19 years, captive raised,
Wow.
and just has so much of it. He's like, dude, I love it, but I want something else.
Yeah.
so, so I bought him out and I said, listen, it'd be pretty expensive for me to buy this all. It was like 75, 80 heads. But I said, every time I sell a head, I'll give you a percentage. And he's like, that's fine with me.
Wow.
So what's really neat about that old school frog spawn is that there are really sort of three distinct color morphs
Hmm.
within, you have your green with a little bit of pink,
Hmm.
you have the violet, and then you have the full mix.
Hmm.
And nowadays, one of the things we do too is we will actually take heads of two different colors, split them in half, and glue them together, and they will successfully graft after a while. So it's really neat.
That is neat.
Yeah. So I wanted to post up some of the farm parameters because, especially I think water temperature wise,
Yeah.
it just blows your mind. This summer has obviously we've had a lot of heat. Um, Normally I'm cursing the shade cloth because I wish I had more par, but this has
Right.
been a summer like if we didn't have the shade cloth, everything probably would have cooked. So
It would melt. Yeah. Exactly.
yeah, so we've definitely been rocking some 85 degrees the
Hmm.
last couple months when I've been down there, especially during the day.
Wow.
Um, Amazingly, everything is fine. I think
Hmm.
it's been a challenge for me to bring some hard corals back up because my own tanks are 77 to 78,
Hmm.
and trying to acclimate them off of 85 is challenging. Some things have done all right and other things haven't been able to. It's just and it's I don't think I ever really thought that this was going to be an issue I would have, that I'd
Hmm.
have to like reverse acclimate something. So it's yeah. Um, I have to sort of reverse acclimate the SPS as it is because since the par down there, I really want to take a par meter down there. I
Yeah.
suspect that the par isn't much more than about 200 or so most of the time.
Hmm.
So a lot of things you have to start off in the shadier sides of your tank, and over the next couple of weeks, then I move them over more to the center. So
When we had our first speaker on, Michelle Jensen from Coral Restoration Foundation, she gave us a big tour of what they do and explained about the corals and the keys that were getting too hot and how they were rescuing them. And I believe, I don't have this mixed up, I think at the Atlanta, Georgia Aquarium provided or donated or contributed toward their coral bus where they rescued corals and brought them on land. And I was very curious as they were taking them out of this hot water they're worried about. Did they kind of still keep the water warm on land? Was the water already warm on land like you're 85, but still it's not 95 kind of a thing? I was
right,
curious, but we didn't have
exactly.
time to get into that. But I was very curious. They probably didn't switch them straight to 77 and say, you'll be okay now.
I would imagine they didn't because
They
that's
probably
a
had to do temperature, keep it kind of close to what they're dealing with, but just a little cooler maybe. As much as
yeah.
they could for being outside facilities like you are doing.
Yeah, I would imagine, and that's I had a shipment of Recordia come from the Caribbean a couple
Hmm.
weeks ago, and they're also having issues with bleaching in Haiti, and some of the Recordia have been because they're not as easily equipped to dive deep because the divers there, a lot of times they're free diving.
Yeah.
It's just a much different situation. than we have here. So some of the stuff has come in bleached, and I don't know, I probably took 40 or 50 polyps down recently,
Hmm.
try to revive them. Because if Ricordia are really bleached out, they won't come back. But
Yeah.
if they are only just like halfway bleached out, oftentimes if you give them a month or two in stable conditions,
Yeah.
they'll come, colors will come back. So and stuff down, and mushrooms really like it down there. And I'm sure the warmer temperature sort of pushes them to procreate faster, so
Yeah.
things will do pretty well down there. So
Huh.
but yeah, it's interesting. I mean, like with the firework clove polyps, I started them. They did gangbusters for probably 6, 7 months,
Hmm.
and then I also gave some to Eric because he had a strain that was just barely growing. Mine was just growing like crazy. He put his in a tank that's literally just on the other, right across the farm from my tank, and his started growing like crazy. My colony started slowing down. I moved them to a different side of the tank. Still, I don't know. It's
Wow.
very, yeah. Some things make you pull your hair out. But one of the things I've learned from coral farming for so many years is it's good to be stubborn in order to grow, but then other things, oh, this isn't working. All right, let's try something else.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to do with zoanthids down there. Because some of the zoanthids, like Gatorades and Twizzlers and Captain Jerks and Daisy Cutters, man, they'll grow like weeds, but
Hmm.
other things don't. But I did notice, I think you can go to the next slide now.
Sure.
So yeah, so this is illustrating, that's the shade cloth
Yeah.
over the farm. So it is a blessing and a curse sometimes. It's definitely been a blessing in summer, um, but and these are just nice views of the
Someone
keys.
turned the return pump off. Look how still that water is.
I know we get some amazingly glassy days,
Hmm.
and so this is present day. This is how much everything has grown out. Lots of stuff I started from
Yeah.
1 to 2 inch frags, and it's massive. I literally, that bird's nest that I have there in the center,
Hmm.
I have, it's on the end of this tank. It's got some underwater baskets with anemones sort of floating on top of it. It's I haven't even done anything with it, and it's like a 2 foot chunk of bird's nest.
Right. Hard to sell too.
Yeah, no, I mostly just give it to friends and stuff.
Hmm.
That's another video of one of Eric's things.
Vertical video on a horizontal show. What were you thinking?
I
You and
know.
your Instagram videos.
So those are all Space Invader
Yeah.
mycelium, and they just grow like crazy. They're very fast growing. So
What did those sell for? That's a nice size. Ballpark.
unfortunately, nowadays they're not really as popular. So those sizes, you're gonna be lucky if you're getting 65 to 80 off of. So
Okay.
then that's magenta stylophora, and the milka
Yeah.
are blue purple stylophora. So
Yeah.
and I think there at the end that's actually some Montipora confusa or Montipora spongotis.
Oh yeah, Spongotus.
But one of the things he sort of struggles with is because a lot of those corals don't move that fast.
Hmm.
He'll have 1 inch frags, and then within 5 months, they're 3, 4 inch mini colonies. They're going into one another. The
Yeah.
sunlight really does increase things. So one of the things that I found is he has a bunch of colonies of like your plain. They call them red peepees. You can go back one slide.
Sure.
Um, and like red peepees, the old school kind of people eater morph zoanthids. The ones he has aren't that colorful, but I noticed his were doing really well long term. So I said, huh, okay, so these Sunny D's and these other chaos and stuff, they don't like it down there for whatever reason. I
Hmm.
suspect it's something to do with nutrients. But I started putting in some of the more colorful PE morphs, like they call these, what is it? White zombies
Hmm.
or blue agavs, and then the top are the crazy ladies, and the bottom, the one in the center, is a morph I got out of Indonesia. And so you can see the mini colony photos, they don't look like much under the sunlight, but then you get them home under the
Yeah.
regular lighting and they look fantastic.
Hmm.
And those guys, for whatever reason, really like it down there. They don't struggle, they keep growing really well. So and then the Rhodactis mushrooms, Discosoma mushrooms, St. Thomas, those are nuclear red Discosoma mushrooms.
Yeah.
Man, they do fantastic. So it's pretty awesome. Yeah, so these are my keys to success.
Hmm.
Creative. Uh, I don't believe in monocultures, especially as a coral farmer. Grow as many different things as you can. And if something stops selling, give it up and put something else in its place.
Hmm.
Um, be determined, be adaptable, because especially with coral farming in the sunlight, say we had a thunderstorm come through and it dumped 6 inches of water, and
Yeah.
it's not really supposed to affect stuff so much, but I think that sometimes it does, you know. So, uh, and I
This
put
is how
that
you go
photo.
to work, huh?
Yeah, exactly. I put that photo in because I was down there one day, and that's just what happens because
Yeah.
it's a long drive, and
Yeah.
I will usually start at 11, and there's no breaks. I mean,
Right.
I'm farming straight for about 5 hours,
So you
and
just work on
stand.
your tan at the same time, apparently.
Yeah, yeah. So we had a thunderstorm that rolled through that day,
Hmm.
and it was raining, but it wasn't lightning.
Yeah.
And so I said, I always wear my bikini top
Yeah.
underneath because say, all right, and then
Yeah.
just keep on and put a towel over myself, and
Right.
water's dripping off of the shade cloth
Yep.
everywhere. But
But that way your sleeve doesn't get wet. I get it. I get it. That makes sense.
now, normally I have a full rash guard on and
Yeah.
sunblock because I'm not trying to catch skin cancer. So.
Right. Right.
And there's just a couple photos of that's the mimosa cloves I added down there. This is one of those things that boggles my mind. I put those cloves and gold flake cloves down there about 5 months ago. They're growing like crazy. My firework cloves are still growing slowly.
Yeah.
All in the same tank right beside each other. So these are the things that I try not to. I don't, when you're farming down there, you just have to be like, okay, I'm just not going to worry about why this isn't doing this. So,
Yeah.
and these photos of my home reefs, I've always kept a lot of recordia. Right
Mm.
now, my home reef is occupied with flower anemones, but um, one of the constants, and I was thinking about that because as a coral farmer and coral seller, I have, I ship out all over the United States, but I also have a bit of local customers that'll come and see me. And about the only thing that isn't fair game for is that for sale are my leather corals. And you can go to the next slide. I've always had a real big thing for different types of uncommon leather corals.
Hmm.
And in my personal tank, I guess I have about 5 different types.
Hmm.
Everybody really loves the radioactive, which is the one on the left there. I
I
think you
see
can go
that.
to the next slide. Yeah. And that you can kind of see that's the radioactive in the front. It, it,
Yeah.
it doesn't quite get weeping willow polyps, but it does get pretty awesome long polyps. I got that from a friend in Bradenton. Geez, I guess that's been growing out in my tank 4.5 years now. And he had, unfortunately, like a lot of people do, he had a stunning mother colony of it. It was
Hmm.
probably about 10 inches or 9 inches. It looked like
Hmm.
a green carpet anemone.
Wow.
But he got bored with it, as people do, and he sold it off. And he gave me a stock that didn't even have a cap on it.
Right.
And
Just a
I said,
piece of
I don't
meat.
care. That was it. Just a stock. And I grew that thing out diligently, and I had a
Hmm.
lot of customers. Can I get a fact? No, no, it's 3 inches. I'm not touching it. You're just gonna have to wait. So,
I have a
um,
saying: I will not frag a frag.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm very anti. I really, and it also is in the way I frag my corals.
Hmm.
Um, I will let like leather corals or different things. I'll let them get out to at least 4 or 5 inches, even bigger, and I'll just trim around the edges. I don't ever cut into a coral like a pie. Some people do, and I
Yeah.
just don't believe that. I feel like it's a little too traumatizing.
Yeah.
So that radioactive leather is interesting in that it doesn't grow quite as fast as the others, but it is really. And then this is my other favorite leather. This is I call the green stardust. So
Hmm.
it's like your traditional tan
Yep.
toadstool leather with the feathery
Yep.
polyps, but this one
Right.
has a green base. So
It's really nice.
yeah, and I've had that iteration of leather for probably 6 years or more now, because the mother colony got, it was originally from Australia when I was working for a wholesaler,
Mm-hmm.
and it got too big and it started to, sometimes leathers, when they get really big and you don't frag them often enough, they'll start fragging
Self,
themselves,
yeah,
you know.
self-fragging, right.
Yeah, and so I started, and that one's not a particularly uncommon leather. That's a neon green Kenya tree leather, but they're
Oh, it's
pretty.
Kenya. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. But I think the neon green Kenyas are pretty awesome. So
This is pretty. I
yeah.
just need that right there for Caitlin's tank. Just that patch, that
Well,
mixture.
I can manage that.
Yeah, I'm doing badly at choosing colors. That's the problem. I put them in, they all kind of look blah. I'm like, wow,
Oh,
why don't I get the pop? I mean, yes, you can change the colors to blue on the tank, and then there is some, but it's just I feel like I'm lacking some colors. I haven't figured. I don't know. I guess I keep buying oranges, hoping that'll magically make it look better. But I think I need these reds, and I need maybe some
yeah.
blues or some
Yeah,
peaches or something.
the ones in the center, those actually have a funny name. Those are called porn stars, the red with the aqua centers. I didn't name them.
Okay.
I don't understand, but it's okay.
Yeah.
But those are pretty cool because they look sort of like magicians, but they're more red
Mm-hmm.
and they stay a bit smaller, and they're nice and fast growing. I put a chunk down on the keys and they're doing well.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, this is just a lot of stuff that I have currently that I keep in my own home tanks. I grow a lot of zoanthids, but I also source a lot of stuff from other
Mm-hmm.
people. For me, as I really started that back, geez, probably as far back as 2008, when people were going through a truly hard recession, and so many people were getting out of the hobby because they couldn't afford it.
Right.
And I instead of trying to buy Indonesian corals all the time, which a lot of stores start out like that, um, but it gets expensive, you know.
Of course it does, and the
Your-
shipping's expensive too.
yeah, and your markup on Indonesian, stuff that from wholesalers
Yeah.
isn't, so buying from other hobbyists is a much better way to go. This
Right.
is those are neglected mushrooms. Those also come from
Those are neglected mushrooms.
neglecta. Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Just
they
'cause
look funny the way the edges are, torn
well,
like
that's
that.
one of their common names is umbrella mushroom. So
All of them are doing the same weird effect. Huh, strange.
yeah, yeah, a lot of them have the tips.
Yeah.
And they were really interesting because when I first started getting them in, you really only started seeing these unusual rainbow colors in the last couple of years. Prior to that, it was just the greens and tans and stuff. Um, and I thought when I first started getting them, I was like, oh, well, these are shade-loving mushrooms
Uh-huh.
because of the St. Thomas and stuff. But I'd put them in the shade, and they'd do okay for a while, and then they'd wither. I'm like, God damn. And then finally, I said, well, let me try this. I started putting them up on the top rock that's only about, I would say it's only about 8 inches from my Kessel AP 700.
Mhm.
And they love it. And I found the sweet spot. And this is currently, my tank is currently overrun by flower anemones. So,
No, that looks nice. I like the mixtures. The thing is, you see them all, and then, like, I mean, I've been in stores before, like, oh, look at
right.
all these. And then I don't know, let's just throw a number. Let's say they're 45 each. So you're like, okay, I'll take 3. So you pick like 3 colors, and you come home, and they kind of all look 3 the same. You're like, oh, I should have really got like 19 of them, because then you get this look, because you get that Skittles effect.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's
Well, and
tricky.
the nice thing about these is they're from the Caribbean. So these are not half-dollar size anemones. These
Uh-huh.
are 4 inch across flower anemones. So you get a
Wow.
lot more bang for your buck as far as color and
They look
size.
like fish eaters to me, man. Look at those
No,
things.
they're really not. They've gotten a bad rep over the years,
Mm-hmm.
and I think more often that tends to be people who have had fish die, and then of course the flow blows the fish into the anemone.
Uh-huh.
They are non-hosting anemones. I have had it. It's just case by case. I have had a couple clownfish in the past host them. They didn't eat the clownfish, but you can have the anemone crabs and the
Oh,
anemone
yeah.
shrimp. So
And sexy shrimps and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right.
So
Well, it's
but
8:01, so I'm putting this on the screen for you.
fantastic.
Hint,
We
hint.
did it.
We did it!
That's just
I gotta
fine.
bring on Tiger Boy, so we have to wrap
Perfect.
this one up. But
Thank
I
you
want
so
to.
much, guys.
I was gonna say thank you for coming on. This was so
Well, thank
nice,
you.
and you didn't have to wake up some weird hour. I just
Yeah,
had
I
to stay awake.
appreciate
But
that.
yeah.
Although I don't know if I would have said yes if you'd said 3 in the morning.
No, I know. That's why I was like, you know, I thought that would
No
be in your
problem.
favor. It was hard on me, but it was great for you.
Thank
So
you so much for putting it on. Thank you.
yeah.